Good morning to those of you who are watching on YouTube. I'm going to take my, maybe I'll leave one. I never read when I have messages, but since I have my outline right here, I might borrow it. So anyway, good morning. My name is Reverend Jack Abel. I'm the Senior Director of Spiritual Care for the Caron Foundation and its treatment centers. And I am excited to bring the Caron Chapel service from a unique location on this particular Sunday because we are in the midst of some equipment upgrades in our regular location, the Chit Chat Auditorium. So we happen to be, for those of you who are watching on YouTube and know the campus, we're in Serena Hall this morning, and excited to be able to still pull off chapel without access to the main auditorium. I have an in-person audience, and I have patients who are observing the chapel service around the campus through our live stream facilities, which we implemented like exactly a year ago when all of our lives changed dramatically with the 2-week shutdown for the pandemic. So just shows we are powerless over a lot of things. That's what my friend Father Bill used to say. I have a message for you this morning. I feel just a little rattled because the way we got started was not entirely customary. That's very understandable. I'm trying to remember where I saw it, but I think it was when I first started working here in 2008, and I walked into one of the medical offices, and somebody had a sticker up on one of their partitions in one of the cubicle areas, and it said, "Rehab is for quitters." And it struck me funny. Maybe you don't get it, but anyway. The point that I seek to move towards is that there is not only stigma about addiction, which there certainly is stigma about addiction, but there's stigma even about rehab. And there's a stigma about, it's funny because there's two sides to it. There's what people who are not in our circumstances say about us. I'm a person in long-term recovery, so I'm putting myself in company with you. I hope you don't mind me welcoming myself into your community, but I feel very much a part of that. Still today, although it's a long time since I had a drink or a drug with the intention solely of getting intoxicated. And so not only do people make fun of the addict in their struggles and difficulties, which some people do, and call the addict who is struggling, weak, frail, purposeless, stupid, all kinds of sort of horrible ways that people who suffer from this, I deeply believe this is an illness. We never do that to people who suffer from cancer. I hope we don't do that for people with diabetes or heart disease. Oh my God, you have diabetes, we just never would do that. And yet, there are people who do this to those of us who suffer from this affliction. And it's mirrored in a way that I think is inescapable because we're all human beings, and so it's easy to take it on, especially because the things we do when we're in our addiction are not exactly salutary. We're not exactly able to go, I had this addiction, but I'm still functioning super well, or I'm still a great dad, or whatever. No, the affliction impairs our capacity to function well, and so there's a lot of shame that rides with being in the seats that you're in. And it would be easy. I'm one of a number of people who work not only on this campus but in this field who are looking for new language today, because we've become very conscious of how negative the historic, wonderful recovery programs really were, because they bought into this idea of a drunk, we're just a group of drunks, and there was a camaraderie that was meant by that I totally get, but I would prefer to not call myself a drunk and prefer to state that I'm a recovering alcoholic, if need be, to talk about it in a more positive way. And even the word recovering, in a way, has a little bit, it challenges me, because it suggests a going back to a previous state, which I would like to think of this as forward movement. So one of the weird things about my journey is I did learn to speak French as a child, and I've tried to maintain my French, and the way French speaks about AA meetings is their reunions, which I think is cool. And the substitute word for recovery, I believe, is relancement, which is like relaunching. And I kind of dig that. I think it's kind of like a really nice tweak on the notion of what it is that you're seeking here, which is really, really, that's where I want to go, is that I want to speak for a few minutes about the extraordinary courage that I think people who brave mental health journeys are manifesting, and how amazing people who struggle with mental health issues, that's who we are. We're struggling with mental health issues. And people who are neurotypical, that's an important word, it's a useful word. People who are neurotypical view those of us who are not neurotypical as outside of the box, as weirdos, as different. So, and that may be because you have PTSD, because you suffer from depression, suffer from anxiety, you have been diagnosed with things like bipolar disorder, or you have features of your personality that people describe as narcissistic, that's me, arrogant, that's me, a borderline, and and even the labeling is shaming all in and of itself. And it can be very easy for somebody to tell me that I've exhibited those features, and for me to kind of crumble inside and turn around and run away. And I don't know if you're in tune with that, or if you feel that this morning, or if you'd rather not feel it. When I was listening to Fats on Wednesday play that song, and I was thinking about talking to you about valor and courage in recovery, and he went from the quiet introduction to the kind of plaintive screaming, I walk the thin line, like it hit me. Your song just absolutely hit me in my very soul, and I loved it. And I am trying to piggyback on the emotion of that moment to say that you have the opportunity today, and I have the opportunity to invite us to shift from apology and defensiveness and insecurity to cheerleading and celebration and gusto. Like, somebody said something to, you dedicated that to Kyle because you said it's his last day. And I wanted to jump in and say, it's his first day. Like, because even the last day, and I'm picking on you, I just told you I love this song, but like, the last day is like, rehab is prison, Rehab is not prison. Rehab is the prep for the launch. And rehab is awesome. It's not a negative, it isn't, did you want to put rehab on your resume? Were you planning on having that on? No, of course not, right? But many of our patients are terrified about what the implications are if they disclose that they have been in treatment for their jobs and with their families, and I can't tell my grandmother or whatever. And somewhere along the way, and you have to decide when that is, when is it okay? Does the person have to have 9 months of sobriety, 9 years of sobriety, or whatever, but when they get to do what I get to do, which is I get to brag about my recovery. I get to say, I am neuroatypical. I suffer from an illness. I have personality features which are not necessarily the most flattering, whatever, but I have been provided the resources and support that I need to be able to function in my life, and the people who are around me love me, and I get to have, I'm married, and I have family, and I have a job, and I mean, it's all kind of worked out. And it's worked out in a way I would have never imagined. And I'm not talking about my own valor or courage, because that would be so arrogant and narcissistic, and I just told you I'm really good at that, but I want to talk about your valor and your courage. I want to really tell you that I deeply believe that. I believe in my very soul that you are at a moment when it's time to step up and that we should be thinking about this, and that people who come here and who do what is involved in taking this journey as really embodying the noble courage of a human being in adversity, facing a strife that should be about what we're all about. When I was a little kid, I thought Evel Knievel was cool because he was an idiot jumping off of, Snake River Canyon, And what I understood is, I thought daredevilness and foolhardiness was courage. I thought that because my oldest brother would get in bar fights, that was like, it was a machismo thing. And it never occurred to me to be proud of my dad because he suffered from crippling rheumatoid arthritis, and he got up every day and went to work. And now that my knuckles are starting to scream and talk to me, I'm like, oh my God, I want to be able to apologize to my dad. I visited his gravesite this weekend, and I want to say, like, Dad, you were so brave. You loved us so much that you fought your affliction to provide us a home. And he was not perfect. He suffered from the same crap that we all suffer from, but now I see it in a totally different light. So I'm sure there isn't a Caron patient here who has that idea that, like, bravery involves, kicking ass and taking power. Sadly, I'm pretty sure there are people here. I was being sarcastic. I unfortunately think that we live at a time when our ideals as society champion people who make fools of themselves and are embarrassments because they reflect what we as a society believe are supposed to be what we're teaching my granddaughters to try to become. And you and I, Father Bill Holtberg would have loved this message because he was so into this. He was like, people do not realize that those of us who come to Caron, we can be the leaders of a new return to dignity and integrity and virtue, and like to talk about, because what the 12 steps call us to are things that we can be proud of. Honesty and amends and a spiritual life and authenticity and humility and service. These are the core principles that underlie the recovery journey. And if you do it in Dharma recovery, it doesn't mean you're not into service or you're not into the different recovery communities that have constituted themselves over the last 80 years are each in their own way quite amazing and beautiful. And I happen to be an AA guy, and I'm really fond of AA. I actually started in NA, and I've sampled a bunch of other A programs. And for a year, I had the privilege of facilitating a Recovery Dharma community meeting in New York, and that's an amazing community as well. So you have different ways of doing this. But let me return to the simple idea that what I want to say, I love the word valor. People of valor tell truth and right wrongs of which their past have been a part. Like if you, the standard of valor is not perfection, it's integrity. And if you feel awful because you had your nth DUI, or you're in your third breakup of a significant relationship, or you've lost a job or whatever, that doesn't mean you are prevented from thinking of yourself in the category I'm trying to offer today. Because you can be brave and courageous in the aftermath of humiliation and defeat. By acknowledging the humiliation and defeat and telling truth about how and where you got there. And then in an attempt to live in dignity to seek to begin to make amends. The sad, tragic truth is that many of us and many of our brothers and sisters who suffer in this illness with us don't ever make that turn to integrity, honesty, and repair. We just keep perpetrating the harm because we keep drinking and using and keep, and this is a bigger message. I'm going to shut up in a minute, but it applies to people who face trauma and PTSD. It applies to people who face grief. It applies to people who suffer from depression without necessarily an addictive overlay, or whose depression predated. And I say that in a gentle way. What I want to say is that what's been hardest for me in my life is that I've had people who suffer from other forms of mental health disorders and who have refused help when offered. And I can't condemn. I just recently was very affected by someone's witness to suicide, which is so heartbreaking. Suicide is just so brutal. So I certainly don't totally understand it, but my worry is if you have been offered help and you won't take its hand, I really am sad and scared about that. And I think there is greater courage in those of us who suffer and tell that what's one of the most courageous things that a person can do is say, I'm thinking about not being able to stay here anymore. That takes unbelievable guts. And talk about shame. I mean, it's a thing that the society doesn't do a great job of going, wow, it's awesome that you said that aloud. So I want to say that. If you are, wherever you're struggling, whatever you're struggling with, I want to shout out those who walk the thin line and who step out of the shadows and seek to own their complicity in harmful and painful events and strive to live a better life one day at a time. That's who we are. That's what we're about. And we can hold our heads high and cheerlead one another. And as Kyle goes on his way, go get him, brother. Like, it's an awesome thing. So I'm proud to be among you and to be able to be the person who says, we have other ways of thinking about this than those that are imposed on us from the outside. Thank you, Mark.